Creating a custom homeschool is a bit of a process. We can jump right into choosing curricula, but a truly custom homeschool requires data-driven decision making. That means that we start off not with researching curricula, but with defining the needs of our family. In the last few videos, I've been describing the steps of the defining needs stage of the homeschool planning decoded method of planning and organizing your homeschool. I'm Leslie Maddox, an engineer turned homeschool mom, and I want to help you customize your homeschool. Let's continue with the homeschool customization process by taking a big picture look at how you want your academic year to look. When do you want to begin the academic year? Do you want to be done by a certain day? Do you plan to take vacations or an extended winter break maybe? Do your local homeschool laws require a certain number of school days? We'll talk all about that in this video and more. But first, know that the Homeschool Planning Decoded Starter Kit contains worksheets to help you with this process of defining your academic year. It contains academic year calendars for you to mark up, and it also contains a year-at-a-glance worksheet that will allow you to get very specific with your monthly plans. You can find a link to the starter kit below. Now, let's talk about how to draft the upcoming academic year. You will need to know your local homeschool laws to complete this step. So grab your completed legal requirements worksheet from the starter kit or watch the previous video to learn about how to figure all of that out. Back to drafting your academic year. Keep in mind that it's only your first stab at creating a schedule for the year. You'll finalize it and refine it after you purchase curricula and make lesson plans. I'll go over some considerations you should make in order to draft your academic year, and if you stick to the end, I'll share with you an interesting alternative to a traditional school year. But first, let's talk about more traditional ways to go about things. There are a couple of different things that you can do. You can create a completely custom yearly schedule that takes nothing into consideration but your family's preferences. Or you can match up your yearly schedule to the local school calendar. That means that you would have the same first day and last day of school as your local public school or your local private school, as well as days off and half days. This might be a good option for you if your kids have a lot of friends in school and you want them to have the same days off as their friends. And it can be fun to celebrate the same first and last day of school as everyone around you. If you'd like the local school calendar to be a consideration for you, get online and pull up the calendar of your kids' friends school and use it to determine first and last days and days off. If you use the academic year calendar in the starter kit or a calendar you find with the entire academic year all on one page, you can highlight first and last days with a specific color and days off with another color. Or you can create first day, last day, and no school codes in the key on the year-at-a-glance worksheet in the starter kit and mark those days in the appropriate months with your codes. If you're not using a local school calendar as a reference, simply choose a day that you think will make a good first day of school. If you want to enjoy the last days of summer, or if you'd like to take a trip with your family when most other kids are in school, beginning school on a day in the first half of September should work for you. You could also use the calendar year as an academic year, where your kids would move up to the next grade in January rather than a more traditional academic year. Or you could begin school around your child's birthday. So if the compulsory age for school in your area is 6 years old, you would begin homeschooling them right after their 6th birthday. If you're new to homeschooling, I recommend that you stick with a more traditional academic calendar to keep things simple. After choosing a tentative first day of school, turn your attention to when you absolutely want to be done with school for the year and mark that as well. You'll likely move these days around a little before you're done with your homeschool planning, but it's good to have some dates to work with. We'll talk about that less traditional option for drafting your academic year later, but first let's talk about days off. What days do you think you'd like to take off from school? Even if you're not sure, go ahead and mark them because we'll be counting up days later and need to know if you have too many days off or if you're good to go. I like to mark birthdays as no school days. A fun thing about homeschooling is that our kids can have a break from schoolwork on their birthdays as a special little treat. We like to spend birthdays doing something special, some special activities to celebrate. So all of the kids get the day off from school, not just the birthday kid. I then go in and mark days off for our winter break. We usually take off 2 weeks at the end of December. If you're not using a local school calendar as a reference, decide if you want to take days off in December and mark them off as well. I've heard of some homeschoolers taking the entire month of December off from school so that they can focus on baking and family events and other holiday activities. After marking days off for a winter break, think about if you'd like to plan for a spring break. If you're working with a local school calendar as a reference, you've probably already marked days off for spring break since they'll have that on their calendar as well. But if not, think about if you'd like to take days off for a trip or just have a break in March or April. At that point, you'll probably be ready for a break. So don't think you're just going to power through. You might want to take some time out so you don't burn out. If it's probable that you'll want to take some days off during that time, go ahead and mark a few days off. You can always change your mind later. Even if you're not sure when you would want to take that break, you can change the actual days off later on, but we need to keep track of how many days off you plan to take during the academic year. So just pick something, think, do I want to take 5 days off? Take those days off and mark them. Next, look at what other holidays you might want to take off. In the US, do you want to take off just a couple of days for Thanksgiving or maybe the whole week? How about Good Friday? My husband gets banking holidays off, so in years past, I've marked off those days that he'll have off from work so that we can do something together on his days off. But I've stopped doing that the last couple of years so that he can work on personal projects on those days if he so chooses. So think about your spouse's work schedule and, of course, your own as well if you're homeschooling while you're working from home or outside of the home. One more thing to think about. Are you interested in Sabbath schooling rather than a traditional academic year? I promised you that I'd share with you an alternative to the traditional academic calendar, the schedule that I use, and this is it. Sabbath schooling involves taking time off from school throughout the school year rather than a long summer break. It's called Sabbath schooling because after every 6 weeks of school, you would take a week off. This type of schedule means that you would not match up with a local school calendar and would likely have to school into the summer in order to complete the school year, especially if you're required to school a certain number of days each year in your local area. The benefit is that breaks are interspersed throughout the school year, and they help to delay burnout for the homeschool mom. For several years, I actually used a 5 weeks on, 1 week off schedule before moving to 6 weeks on, 1 week off. I mark the last Friday of July as our last day of school for the academic year, although the last month or so of school for us is usually pretty light as we complete curriculum. On the weeks off, I usually plan for my kids to do schoolwork that doesn't require me to grade or teach. That gives me a little bit of break from teaching. Things that they can do on their own is what I plan for them, like online learning or science experiments for my older son. Or they do other educational activities to meet their educational objectives in a fun or a different way. So I might have them do math practice using a fun app and read a book of their choosing each day. That kind of thing. So rather than a week off, we call those easy weeks. If they do learning activities during the week off, I count them back in as school days. I get a week off from teaching and grading, and my kids get an easy week with more free time. If you choose to use a Sabbath schedule, but don't want to schedule any schoolwork during those off weeks, you'll probably still have to make plans to keep your kids busy, especially if you have younger kids. The way I handled this was I would write on our whiteboard a list of types of activities for them to do each day, like play a game, work on a puzzle, read a book, make something, that type of thing. Incorporate some outside time, and that's usually enough to encourage the kids to stay busy doing a variety of things during the day instead of just like watching TV. And yes, I do let them have screen time after they've completed all of their activities and spent some time outside. Of course, if you plan a vacation, field trips, or other activities during that week, like visits to a pool or time with friends. You don't have to think about how to keep them busy. If you think you might be interested in Sabbath schooling, draft a version of your academic calendar with a week off after every 6 weeks of school. Depending on what days you've already marked as wanting off, there may be times that you don't actually get 6 weeks of school in before a scheduled break or vacation. So for example, the period between Thanksgiving and winter break will likely be less than 6 weeks. And that's okay. I just tried not to go more than 6 weeks without taking a week break. The exception would be toward the end of the school year when we already have a light load of schoolwork and therefore more relaxed schooling in general. So if you're interested in this, go ahead and create this alternative weekly schedule in addition to the one you've already come up with. You may want to move planned time off, like spring break, to one of the off weeks of the Sabbath schedule. After you've marked a first and last day of school and days off, count up how many school days you'll have during the academic year. Here's where you need to refer to your legal requirements to see if you're required to have a certain number of school days each year. If you are, make sure that you have the required number of days scheduled, so adjust as needed. But even if you're not required to have a certain number of days, aim for at least 180 days of school, because this is the number that curriculum creators will probably have in mind and what they're going to support in their curriculum. Even with Sabbath schooling, I don't have trouble hitting that number. If you don't have a 180-day schedule or whatever's required for you, you may need to adjust your first or last day of school or take fewer days off. Once you've done that, you have your first draft of your academic year ready to go. Keep it handy because you'll need to refer to it and maybe even adjust it when we talk about creating lesson plans and a weekly routine. And we'll talk about weekly routines and even daily routines in the next Homeschool Planning Decoded video. Remember that you can access all the videos that walk you through the steps of the Homeschool Plan Decoded method of planning and organizing your homeschool right now at the link below. And happy planning!